Hello, everybody. My name is Adi Martinez. I am Boricua from Arecibo, Puerto Rico, and I'm the co-founder and co-director of Right to Democracy. Very honored to be here and grateful for the invitation. I am here for Right to Democracy's dialogue, cross-territorial dialogue on education under U.S. rule. Right to Democracy is a nonprofit that is working cross-territorially to build a movement to confront the legal colonial framework that affects U.S. territories. We have been spending last year doing a listening tour and a summit on U.S. colonialism, where we decided with leaders of all territories to create a coalition to work for equity, self-determination, and democracy in the territories. And I'm here today with one of our participants, collaborators from the education committee of our coalition, Jessica Samuel.
Hi, good day to all of our viewers tuning in from across the territories in the Caribbean and Pacific. Welcome also to those who may be watching from the mainland or anywhere else across the globe. My name is Dr. Jessica S. Samuel, and I am the chair of Right to Democracy's Education Committee. I am also the founder and CEO of Radical Education and Advocacy League, also known as REAL. REAL is an education organization focused on providing students and those who serve them the tools and resources they need in order to thrive rather than merely survive in their educational journeys. At REAL, we specialize in K through higher education consultation and advocacy, working alongside education leaders to improve outcomes among historically excluded students and to ultimately decolonize education. Today's program, Education Under U.S. Rule, is brought to you by Right to Democracy in collaboration with REAL and WTJX. The topic of today's panel discussion is inspired by the decolonial advocacy work carried out by RTD and REAL, respectively. In particular, we hold this space in recognition that public education has become an increasingly politicized issue across the United States. However, we know that for U.S. territories, public education remains a critical space through which we can assert political agency by crafting curricula that truly reflect our unique histories and culture. It is for this reason and many others that we've brought together educators and education leaders, as well as scholars from across the 5 U.S. territories of American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, in order to discuss the specific way each territory experiences public education within their unique context. Our objective with this forum is to not only share about our individual education journeys or histories, but also to provide an avenue for sharing how our public school curricula can be a tool for local empowerment and ultimately for self-determination. Adi, I am deeply excited and grateful for this opportunity.
I am grateful to you for organizing it and also to present to the public the panelists that we gather from all the territories. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm going to ask them to tell us who they are and also tell us some information about their specific territory that they want to share with us. So first, let's go to American Samoa with Donna and Guerra Simpson. Donna.
Talapalava, everyone. My name is Donna Lucinger Simpson. I'm originally from Tafun, American Samoa. I currently live in Tukwila, Washington. I'm here because I've experienced the American Samoa education system. I went to a private school in American Samoa from kindergarten to 8th grade, and then attended 9th grade at a public school in American Samoa. I've been working in education for 7 years. Something I want the audience to know, I feel like a lot of people don't know, or if they do know, they don't know a lot about it, but people from American Samoa are nationals and not U.S. citizens. There is a big debate on this issue. There are pros and cons. Like citizens are, if we are U.S. citizens, we might lose our rich and complex Matai system and land ownership, or how American Samoa have like one of the highest enlistment rate, but does not have the right to vote for the commander-in-chief. And I think this little piece of history pushes how how American Samoa go for their post-secondary options.
Mhm.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Wonderful people, the Polynesian people of American Samoa really caught my heart when I went visiting in the Pacific. Also from the Pacific, we have Layla Staffler from Northern Mariana Islands. Layla.
Afede Zantiro. My name is Layla Havea Fleming Staffler, and I'm representing the CNMI on this panel. I currently am serving as the Secretary of Labor in the CNMI. However, my journey began in education. I was a teacher for a decade, and after that, I was an administrator for another decade. I dabbled in politics, and now I work in government and administration. And transitioning from education to government, I've gained a profound appreciation for the pivotal link between education and workforce development. Witnessing so many of my former students now contributing to the CNMI's workforce underscores the critical role of education, and noting that the community is really, that the well-being of the community, it really is important for every student that needs to get a job after they graduate. I'm deeply committed to bridging the gap between education and workforce needs, recognizing that every student's future impacts our economy and the vitality of our island.
Thank you so much, Layla. Also in the Pacific, in the same archipelago, in the Mariana Islands, we have the wonderful island of Guam. And from Guam, we have Dr. Keisha Borja Quichocho Calvo. Keisha, can you introduce yourself?
Buenas and half a day from Guahan or Guam, Sidos Maasi. Thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel. My name is Keisha Borja Calvo, and I'm the assistant professor and program coordinator of the Samoa Studies program at the University of Guam. I've been an educator at the post-secondary level for almost 15 years, where I've taught courses in college writing, political science, education, and now Samoa Studies. I was also a language arts and creative writing teacher for a few years at one of our local public high schools. And throughout my teaching career, whether in my high school classroom or my college classroom, I've actively worked to decolonize education, primarily through making content and curricula more place-based, more culturally relevant, and culturally sustaining. One distinguishing thing about Guahan in relation to education that I'd like the audience to know about is that we've been a colony of the United States for almost 125 years, and public education remains part of this colonial legacy. However, while the U.S. has aimed to erase the indigenous Samoa language, for example, from our education and from our community, our people have continued to work very hard to use public education as a tool to teach and to perpetuate our indigenous language. Including the creation of our first Samoa immersion program, the Whanedakan Sini Book Program, which teaches all content areas for grades kindergarten through 4th grade, and we're anticipating 5th grade in our native Samoa language.
And what a wonderful program, Keisha, that you guys have developed in Guam. And definitely you became a colony with us in Puerto Rico, 125 years of colonialism from the U.S., because before that we were a colony of Spain. So I wanted to go back to the Caribbean, to my island home. We have with us Dr. Georgina Candal Segurola. Let's see if we can get her to introduce herself. Georgina, you're on mute and we cannot hear you. Maybe you can unmute really fast.
Yes, I did.
There you go.
Hi, I'm gonna give my salutation also in Spanish. Saludos desde Puerto Rico, which is because Spanish is our original language. So my name is Georgina Candal Segurola. I am from Puerto Rico. I teach at the University of Puerto Rico since 2013. I have been a lawyer for 50 years, and I have represented special education students for more than 40 years. Puerto Rico has a population of over 3 million people, and 56% to 58% of our population is below the poverty level. And 80% of our children live in concentrated poverty. That is reported in the Annie Casey Foundation reports from 2018 to 2019. We have the highest number of special education students of all the jurisdictions that are under IDEA, reported in the annual report to Congress in 2019 to 2021. So as you can see, we have lots of work to do in education, all in the regular program as well as the special education program.
Gracias, Georgina. I am so excited for the conversation we're going to have today. So this is how it's going to work. We're going to go through a round of questions where everybody's going to get a chance to answer and exchange information with each other. Also, at the end, after a round of 3 questions, I will be trying to get questions from the public that are looking at us through the Facebook Live. So if anybody in the public wants to ask a question, please do it in our Facebook page, Right to Democracy or WTJX Facebook Live. And I'm going to be looking for those. So let's get to the action. Let's start with you, Jessica, back here to the Virgin Islands. Please describe the condition of public education in the Virgin Islands, and you can name any challenges faced that you think that relate to the relationship with the U.S. and explain to us why.
Of course. Thank you, Adi. So I believe that some of the challenges that we face here in the United States Virgin Islands, in fact, fall into 3 main buckets, 3 main categories. First, there's the infrastructural issues that we face. Then we have challenges around curriculum and instruction. And then finally, we have challenges around the quality of life and standard of living. And I think each of these things actually impact students and learning. So first, on the infrastructural level of things, we have 2 components. First, there's the organizational infrastructure. So specifically the way in which our Virgin Islands Department of Education is organized systemically. We currently have a state office, and that is the State Education Agency, which is headed by the commissioner and her cabinet. And then we have 2 local education agencies, and those are represented by our separate districts. So we have St. Croix, which consists of its own district, and then St. Thomas and St. John, and they are a joint district. Those are 2 separate islands. Now, within our VI code, there has been sort of provisions for those local education agencies to actually work in tandem directly with the Virgin Islands Board of Education. But in practice, that doesn't necessarily work out to be that way. And I think a lot of that is actually because of the cumbersome nature of our status as a territory, whereby funding and accountability for funding has it so that our commissioner actually ends up presiding and having these 2 local education agencies report directly. This, I believe, creates a level of bureaucracy that doesn't always afford efficient initiatives to be had, pursued, and also sustained. Outside of our organizational structure, in terms of our infrastructure, I believe that our built environment itself struggles. So across all the 3 islands, we actually have a majority of schools that are not in good conditions. And a lot of this has been due to the damages sustained by our storms experienced in 2017, Irma and Maria. But some of the disrepair that these buildings have actually precede that natural disaster. And so currently throughout our high schools, throughout our elementary schools, there are HVAC units that don't function really well. Some school buildings have mold, there are leakages or inoperable restrooms. And I know that our education officials have been working around the clock to improve those conditions, but some of those structural problems, they persist and they continue. Outside of infrastructural issues, to the point of curriculum instruction, here in the Virgin Islands for decades, we've had a number of grassroots organizations really fight and advocate for the creation of a comprehensive school curriculum that would focus on Virgin Islands history, because currently our school curriculum doesn't reflect our local heritage, and that's been a response to our colonial predicament, I believe. And then finally, I believe that the quality of education that students are afforded here in the US Virgin Islands is a direct result of the quality of life and standard of living that they experience. Based upon recent reports conducted through the Casey Foundation as well, specifically the Kids Count data book, we know that 30% of our children are actually living in poverty here in the Virgin Islands. And there's a direct correlation between poverty and students' ability to really access a quality education, and specifically for their ability to show up in the classrooms and be able to learn and retain information. So I think that a lot of our problems that we experience are really encaptured by these threefold areas of issues and challenges: the infrastructure, our curriculum instruction, and finally, the way in which students and their families are living here in the Virgin Islands.
I really liked how you pointed to the intersectionality of the problems that are faced by the educational system. And I feel that much of that is also seen in Puerto Rico, with the high level of poverty. A few weeks ago or months ago, we had a protest because of the status of the school conditions. So I want to go now to Georgina, so she can explain to us, Georgina, what is the state of education in Puerto Rico? What are those challenges that you can share with us?
Well, as you know, the first thing that I want to point out is that the Constitution of Puerto Rico guarantees every person to the right to an education through our Constitution, Article 2, Section 5. But we know that this has not been really accomplished. As I have stated, the special education students make up 38 to 41% of the public education students in Puerto Rico. So it's the highest in all the jurisdictions under IDEA. The regular education, as well as the special education, is marred by politics, corruption, and political influences. Private contracts as well as jobs are granted due to political influences. We have had 2 education secretaries that have gone to jail because of corruption and embezzlement of federal funds. Presently, we have an ethical investigation of an ex-associated secretary of education that still holds a permanent post in the Puerto Rico Department of Education because he was using his post to give awards to his political cronies. As a problem that is really due to our relation to the United States, I would say that there is a lack of oversight and interest that the U.S. Department of Education demonstrates in Puerto Rico. They have known for many years about the poor conditions of our education, and the response has been some admonitions, even slowing the funds into the Puerto Rico Department of Education, and now they have established a trustee to oversee the federal funds. But no progress has happened in any of the problems that so impair our public education. In 2019, more than 25% of 4th and 8th grade students were not proficient in reading and math. Since 2023, the U.S. Department of Education has tried to implement a project called IDEAR, which tries to end the centralized system that we have in Puerto Rico. Its goals is to decentralize the Puerto Rico Department of Education and regionalize the education funds to try to depoliticize it. In April and May, though, many of those that had been volunteer professionals, such as our own law school dean, Vivian Neptune, that were in an advisory capacity in that project, had to quit and have demanded that the process is halted because the Puerto Rico Department of Education has been going against all the goals of the project by not providing information to the volunteers and by keeping the decision of power centralized and politicizing the process. The Puerto Rico Department of Education also lacks a cohesive educational policy that affects our public education. There are very good random projects in public schools that may very well be of lots of help for our students, but such special projects to help students to read the Montessori system and others, but they are not integrated into our system, but just like unique projects in the island.
Georgina, and I'm going to give you a chance in the end to talk to us a little bit more about those initiatives that are able to bring solutions to the challenge faced. Because for me, it's really painful for all of Puerto Ricans to have an education department with so many funding, with so much funding, and it's so politicized with clientelism and corruption, and it is related to the culture of colonialism that is created when you have a colonial extractive governance, and the only way to develop is with the use of federal funds. So we're going to go now to see how this compares in the Pacific. We already heard Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. Now we're going to go to Guam. Dr. Keisha, can you tell us more about how is the state of education in Guam?
Sure. So like what's happening in the Caribbean, I think we share in a lot of those situations in terms of the context of our public education system here, which is known as the Guam Department of Education. Our schools are struggling. We were just hit with a super typhoon last year in May. And so even before then, up until that time, but definitely after the typhoon, we've really been struggling with in terms of the infrastructure of our schools. At this point, our Department of Education is considering decommissioning and shutting down certain schools because we've lost a large amount of students to either private schools, charter schools, or even people moving off island. So that's kind of the gist of what's going on. I think the others covered it, and it's very similar here, as I said. So I'd like to. There's so much to talk about in terms of public education here in Guahan. And so I just decided to focus on two things. One is curricula, and the other one is funding. In terms of curricula, our Guam Department of Education aligns itself with the U.S. DOE, and so the curricula is very U.S.-centric. All courses except language courses are taught in English rather than in our indigenous Samoa language. And the content is based on the context of the US, meaning that our people know more about the United States than they do about ourselves, even our nearby sisters and brothers in the Northern Mariana Islands. We name the 50 states and capitals, but we often struggle even to name the villages in our island. We know American authors, but we can't name Samoa or other Pacific or indigenous authors. And this is a major challenge because, as I think Dr. Jessica mentioned earlier, right? Similarly, our curricula does not reflect our identities, our culture, our history. And because of that, and let alone our colonial history and our colonial realities, right? And because of that, our people remain ignorant of who we are and where we come from, which is directly connected to the continued maintenance, right, of this kind of status quo political, our political status of status quo, which is an unincorporated territory of the United States, right? Our curricula is definitely affecting that. Our content standards of our GDOE because they're aligned with the U.S. DOE, our educators and administrators have pulled from states like Massachusetts and Indiana, which have less than 1% Pacific Islander populations and an even lesser Samoa population. So again, it's a problem, right, in terms of our not being reflected in our curricula, and because of this ignorance, again, it leads our people to believe that we are not worth learning about or knowing about, right? We ourselves are not valuable or valued enough because we don't see ourselves in our curriculum. And so we often look to the United States as being, better, or that, as the American dream, right? Rather than looking at ourselves and our Samoa dream, right? What's important to us. And then the second point that I wanted to talk about is funding. And so because we are a territory of the United States, we rely heavily on federal funding. And therefore, our Department of Education is bound by federal guidelines and policies when it comes to programming and curriculum development. And so our ability to make changes within our system is quite challenging because of our limitations set forth by our reliance on federal funding. So they kind of go hand in hand, but I think those are the two biggest issues that I wanted to mention today in terms of, what's going on with our public education system and how it ties to our relationship with the United States.
Thank you so much, Keisha. It is so sad to hear those stories of displacement and of cultural abandonment. In Puerto Rico, the U.S. Forced for a few years, tried to force English education in the island. And Spanish is so ingrained in our culture that it was impossible to do. And that's the only reason we were able to save that part of our culture, our language, was the resistance of students, of families, to be taught in their native language. And it is just painful to hear how much stuff we have in common. And I suspect that when we go to CNMI and we hear from Layla, it's going to be something in the same lines. Layla, can you tell us about the conditions of public education in CNMI and what challenges are you facing?
Thank you, Adi. So I never got a chance to say the unique thing about us, and I think that's important to put into the context of this conversation. The CNMI, the uniquest thing about us with respect to the territories is that we're the youngest of all the territories, having joined the American family only 49 years ago in 1975. And that's something that really does impact our experience and perception of self-determination, sometimes in contrast to the other islands in the territories. And one of the things that I am recognizing after listening to you is that it sometimes makes me think of in a family how the younger child is treated differently or maybe has a different experience than the older children. And even knowing that Guam and the CNMI are part of the same archipelago because of our different colonial histories and masters of the past, it's led us on different paths. And so I feel like we definitely have similar experiences in some areas, but they are different in others. And so I'll explain a little bit. In the CNMI, the education system, I would say, is probably a gem in the Pacific. We definitely have had a lot of support from the federal government. When you look at our you look at our breakdown of funding for our school system, say $25 million comes from the local government, whereas the federal government has provided about double that for our support. So we have about $56 million in federal funding. That was more than usual because of the CARES Act. But the point is that federal funding has always outweighed our local funding. And so the investment in education on our local side is definitely failing and doesn't address all of the needs. Like in other islands, we also experience multiple devastating storms, one in 2015, one in 2018, then the pandemic. And so the infrastructure of our schools does have a lot of work to be needed, but I can see that because we're younger, it's not as bad yet as it could be in some of the other areas. But if we don't invest in those things, we will be on the same path. I see that our education system put a lot of effort into trying to address student mental health needs and also integrating technology really early, even before the pandemic. We had a lot of extensive training for teachers and staff in online education. The CNMI actually was one of the first education systems to establish an online learning platform even before the pandemic. And so when we came into the pandemic, we had a great foundation to start from, with our parents, our students, and our teachers having that training, having the equipment, having the access to online learning that maybe made our transition a little bit better than other areas because of that focus, particularly in mental health. The school system got a like $6 million grant before the pandemic because we had a high incidence of suicide rates that were being addressed with this strategy, and it just came in so perfect timing with the pandemic right after that. However, despite those advancements, our system does face challenges that intersect with our relationship with the United States. Similarly, like what's happened in Guam and the other territories, where our curricula doesn't reflect place-based learning whatsoever. Our kids know more about mountains and prairies than they do about our own oceans, which is really sad because we have an amazing ocean right outside our door. We are, the Pacific continent. If you think about it, our people were navigators of the ocean and relied on the stars and the moon and the tides and the sea just to understand and know where we're going. And that knowledge has been lost sorry, let me calm down. That knowledge has not been entirely lost, but it's not something that is widely known, and it is something that we're trying to bring back with more cultural education. I see that the focus on college readiness has been part of our problem because we haven't really been also looking at what our actual workforce needs are in the CNMI. If you look at our JVAs, 70% of all JVAs are in jobs related to the trades, but our school system curriculum is looking at college readiness versus trades readiness, and that is a disconnect when you think about our economy. But when I really think about the foundations of our traditional native language, our cultural knowledge, it's something that does show that the many territories that have been colonized by the various powers have experienced the decline in their indigenous language and traditional sciences. Over the past several decades, since becoming part of the American family after World War II, the CNMI has seen rapid westernization that's greatly contributed to the loss of our native language and traditional practices. And there are efforts to preserve indigenous language and knowledge. We do also have a burgeoning immersion program. Ours only goes to 3rd grade, and the school system has tried to scale it up. But there are challenges because there's not enough qualified teachers to teach the classes. Also, when you think about our other practices like medicinal healing knowledge, if you think about it, we had been practicing our own medicinal healing for thousands of years, and only in the last 75 years have we really seen our knowledge really strip away. When you think of the youngest healer that we have, they're older than me, and I'm in my 40s already. And so our medicinal healing practices that kept us alive for years, in the past is a knowledge that we've lost. And similarly with our traditional sailing knowledge, all of these are indigenous sciences that maybe aren't as important in the Western world, but if you really think about it, that's what kept us alive and kept us sustaining on our lands for thousands of years before the colonies came to us. And so it's a broad piece. So in our Western side, our education system is pretty good, I would say. There are still challenges with funding, like I said, but when we think of the loss of our traditional knowledge, that's where I really see a big gap. And I see Guam's efforts to move forward in prioritizing that as something that the CNMI is a little bit behind on. And I applaud your efforts, and I feel like we could learn a lot from you.
Definitely, we can learn a lot from each other. And I want to give a space to American Samoa, the second youngest of the kids to come and explain to us what is the conditions of education and what are the challenges that you're facing there.
Hi, just like what everybody mentioned before, like similar conditions with the American Samoa education system. It really hits to heart when we talk about that our education system is taught in English and not in our native language. I'm speaking. My story is from like someone that went through the education, not worked in the education in American Samoa. Um, when I was 8 through 12 or K through eighth grade, all our courses were taught in English. Only U.S. history, taught from the colonizer's perspective. We were never taught to challenge, like who founded America. We were only like this information. That's what you're told, nothing else. And that was really hard going into when I moved here to America because when you went to a college here, that was not how it would work if you went to college. And it just is so interesting how because I went to a private school and I went to a public school. And when I went to a public school, I was told you can take a Samoan history class, but you can't take it till you're a senior. So you have 4 years of high school, but you can't take a Samoan course till you're a senior. This was 10 plus years ago. I don't know how it is now in American Samoa right now. One thing I do want to highlight is that they always talk like the phrase you always hear if you're Samoan is adults always say the key to success is education. They always say this: the key to success is education, but they don't give you access or how to use this key to education. They just tell you go get an education, but you're not talked about post secondary options, what is offered, what your options are. And another thing, because we have a big military base in American Samoa, it's really hard to change narrative for young students to stray away from the military pathway as a post-secondary option. In our 4 major high schools in American Samoa, there are strong JROTC programs. So, and they're like the curriculum and the structure of it. It's you know that they spent a lot of time working on it, and a lot of like when I was there, I did air rifle. I competed. It was amazing, and I was like, "Ooh, I love this. I'm going to join the army." And then my brother, who was in Washington, was like, "Oh no! You got to come to Washington State," because he knew that a big export of American Samoa are our people. Cairo News in 2021 said that American Samoa has consistently enlisted more soldiers per capita than any other U.S. state territory or state, which is crazy because we're a small island, and that's why it's through that rich history of the U.S. presence in American Samoa, and through that's why we have a strong GROTC program. And through my current work I have right now, I have a student that came. I'm sorry, I'm jumping to the next question, but that came here, and I was trying to tell her, it's like, oh, you have different options. She's like, no, I'm going to the military. I'm going to the military. I did GROTC. I'm going to the military. That's what's embedded in students when they go through the education system in American Samoa. And I just want to highlight because I think that's a big challenge and issue, because there's nothing wrong with going to the military, but thinking that's your only option is an issue.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it was fascinating and painful for me when I went to American Samoa to learn firsthand that around 300 young people are recruited every year for the military. 300 in a small island of 48,000 people. That's huge. And I want to stay with you, Donna, because you started answering that the next questions I have for the panelists. And I want to stay with you to give you time to express what are these local efforts and initiatives that you are and working or supporting to improve education in your territory and promote empowerment and self-determination.
Yeah. What I'm doing to support territory education currently, indirectly, it's nothing big. I'm just spreading awareness of American education system and supporting students that come out of the American Samoa system to the mainland, mainly Washington State. So when students, Washington State is one of the, I believe it's the third, but I don't quote me or correct me, but it's one of the fastest and highest growing rate of Pacific Islanders in mainland, which includes Hawaii, Utah, Alaska, and California. And Washington State is not built to support these students. And a lot of the efforts that I've been doing is supporting these students that come out of this education system that taught them that that you're just to regurgitate information. You cannot analyze it, comprehend it. Like what the colonizer's history is, that's what it is, and it's so hard. And then, like for instance, it's like when they go to school and they go JRTC, we have to serve. We go and they are so determined. Like our American Samoa students are like, we're gonna go to the military, and it's so hard to decolonize their mind and be like, there's more than to just serve in the military. We have the sky's the limit for us, and that's a lot of the program that we have is just coaching students and showing them that there are other options other than the military brand or the military. I do a lot of work with mentorship because a lot of students that do come here, they do have a big gap with adapting culturally and also through the American education system here, because American Samoa education is a little bit different. Like how we're taught is to just get the information but not process it. And when I came here, that was a big struggle because teachers would tell you like, what is your thought? Like asking for my opinion. And I was like, oh, I was never taught, because they're just saying this is the information and that's why that's right and that's wrong. I did a lot of mentorship programs to help students kind of decolonize their mind in that aspect, kind of letting and also programming to have students gain early access in post-secondary options that are not military based. Also in the career aspect, because a lot of our students, there's a saying in American Samoa that says that if you are not recruited in the NFL, or if you don't get a scholarship, but it's really limited because you have to have funds to travel outside, you're not joining the military, you're working in the cannery. So that's why a lot of folks go to the military, because no one wants to work in the cannery, and it's really hard to get a scholarship off island. And so a lot of my work has been working with students and letting them know that there are a lot more options than that.
It is fascinating the work that you're doing in mentorship, because of course extractivism is one of the main characteristics of colonialist policies, and having options, or having our young people to imagine options that are not the same ones that are sold to them, is so important. Thank you so much for that work. And I want to go back to the Caribbean. I want to bring our co-host, Jessica Samuels, to tell us a little bit more about what is happening here in the Virgin Islands. What are those initiatives that I know she's working on, a lot of them, and that she is working and supporting?
Yes, absolutely. It's been really incredible to hear from the other territories and education leaders from those spaces, and to learn about all of the ways in which we have these overlaps in our experiences. Here in the Virgin Islands, there's a lot on, there's a lot of efforts being made to improve our public education system. And it's coming from different sectors. So first I'll begin by talking about some of the work that Real has been up to as an organization. Then I'll talk about what I've been up to as an individual scholar, activist, entrepreneur. And then I'll talk about some of what my peer and peer organizations have been up to in terms of initiatives to improve education. So Radical Education Advocacy League, as we mentioned earlier, is an organization that's dedicated to decolonizing ed. And one of the things that we've been really focused on doing in this particular Virgin Islands context is creating avenues, forums, and platforms just like this very one that we're all engaging in today, where we can have really spirited but also critical discourse around what we're experiencing. I wasn't a math teacher. I taught high school English. But I do know that when you're hoping to solve a problem, it's really important to get a really good sense and grasp of what the problem entails. And I think that one of the things that we've been trying to spend a lot of time doing is getting super clear on what our problems are. And these kinds of conversations help us to really peel apart the layers of what really is involved in creating and sustaining a quality education system. So we continue to collaborate with organizations to create these types of forums. Other than that, specifically, we also create a host of student-centered coaching and programming. So one of the things we love to focus on at Real is identity development. And I think this actually speaks to the issue of identity in our curriculum, our conceptions of culture and heritage and the ways in which it is or is not represented in our public schools. And so for us, we believe that a really key component in situating students for success here in the Virgin Islands is working with them one-on-one to help them understand and clarify who they are, tapping into the richness of their history and their culture, and then personalizing their histories in a way that really equips them and empowers them to show up in their schooling and really own it as something that will advance them and will continue to serve them into the future. On a personal note, as Dr. Jessica Samuel, and not specifically as the founder of REAL, I continue to engage in research as an interdisciplinary scholar. I am a social scientist, and so I spend a lot of time collecting data and then turning that data, extrapolating that data into publishable material. So I have focused on writing a series of articles about the history of education here in the Virgin Islands, and they're available online. If you Google my name, you should find them and they should pop up. And the point of this research is really to help us uncover our deep histories and be able to have a better sense of what it really means to be a territory unincorporated and how that actually impacts what the history of education on these islands has looked like and therefore can look like. And then finally, there are a number of organizations here in the territory that are doing incredible work. I want to shout out principally the St. Croix Community Foundation. They are the ones who have been commissioned to produce the Kids Count data book. And they've been doing so for about 3 to 4 years now. And that book has been really important to our understanding of the state of our children's lives here in the territory and how the quality of life that they live directly impacts how they're able to learn and what education means for us as a community and as a society. They've also published a few white papers. One that is super notable is a 2017 Cracking the Code research paper, which actually speaks to the issue I mentioned earlier around the nature of our public school system and the model and how that model isn't actually the most efficient model to really execute these educational objectives. And they continue to host another host of other initiatives and events. I know that out of the Virgin Islands Department of Education specifically, we have an incredible commissioner of education. She made her way up the ranks from a teacher to assistant principal. And I actually was a student at Julia C. Sprouse School while she was a principal. And so it's been really incredible to see her journey and trajectory as now commissioner of education. And I know that at her heart, she loves our children. She's committed to them and their well-being. And they continue to try to resolve some of the more pertinent and persistent issues, specifically speaking to that of our infrastructural dilapidation and those types of conditions. I know most recently there have been measures passed by our legislature to create a separate division and bureau to ensure that those maintenance issues can be handled separately and that funding can be individually allocated to make sure that those types of problems are dealt with. And I think that that's an incredible move on part of the department. I know that the Virgin Islands Department of Education also has a division of cultural education, and they have spent a great amount of time really helping to reconcile this issue around our heritage and culture and culturally responsive educational material and content. And so there are always a host of projects and contexts for young students to participate in that allows them to get some of that culturally responsive curricula that they would not at this time really receive integrated through their curriculum proper. And so I think that on a whole, people are making moves. Organizations are doing their due diligence to make sure that things can improve. One of the things I think we have to continue to think about is how our educational status and the condition of public education isn't something that is within a vacuum, right? How our students are able to learn, the quality of education that they receive, their ability to prove proficiency in various assessments. Right now, our students, they're trailing behind. Unfortunately, our literacy rates are down. And I know that this is a reflection also of national trends. Students are struggling in reading and comprehension, and we have to have interventions that really get at the heart of that. But I do think that at the heart of all of these solutions that we concoct has to be a deep understanding of the ways in which our status, how we are organized as a people and as a territory actually is intrinsically connected to the way our students are able to learn and how we are able to provide for them, whether that's through funding or whether that's through pushing back against the status quo and ensuring that they show up in curriculum and they're reflected and that they feel empowered and able to really take charge of their lives and be invested in the civic future of these Virgin Islands.
I appreciate so much how you have brought the importance of understanding the problems to be able to solve them. And I think that in Puerto Rico, we've gone through cycles of that. And I want to go back to Georgina Candal from Puerto Rico. She started talking to us about the working group that was working on decentralizing education, trying to promote, as I've heard from other panelists, a more student-centered experience, a more locally centered experience. Georgina, can you tell us more about what are the initiatives that you're working on and that you're supporting in Puerto Rico?
Before I go into that, I would like to mention another challenge that was left behind and is very important to our education, and that is the education that is provided by the University of Puerto Rico, which is our only public university in Puerto Rico. And through Promesa that was approved by the Congress in 2018, the government, when the government became bankrupt, the Financial Oversight Management Board for Puerto Rico has cut our budget to 40%. And that has raised also the cost of post-secondary education and has lowered the number of students that are able to get educated, which is important because it's decimating our professionals. So in regards to the efforts that we are working on, we have organizations such as ABNI and a Comité Timón of Rosalía Vélez, mostly comprised by mothers of special education students that provide awareness, training, advocacy, and accompaniment of parents of special education students to empower them and to fully participate in the educational process of their children. They provide also the needed information about the special education and what are the rules and regulations of IDEA. In November 1980, a class action was filed against the Puerto Rico Department of Education because they were and still are not providing special education services that are guaranteed under our Constitution and under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. The Puerto Rico Department of Education is paying daily fines of $11,000 because they are not complying with a stipulated sentence from 2002. At present, the case is still going strong, and the Comité Timón of Rosalía Vélez is the group that represents special education children and the parents. In January 2023, a group of 30 parents of special education students were part of a complaint that was filed before the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights against Department of Education because of discriminatory actions against special education students, and as well as violations of the children and their parents' rights. The complaint was filed by the Special Education Clinic of the University of Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rico Bar Association, Doctora Celeste E. Freites Gonzalez, and me. And we have provided many information, requests for documents, and they have still not answered our complaint because they always answer that they have lots of cases that are pending. IDEA establishes governmental options that allow jurisdictions, The University of Puerto Rico Law School is very much engaged also in improving the education of public schools. We have a special education clinic. We represent students and their parents in complaints, administrative proceedings, and suits filed in local courts regarding the violation of the right to education. Also, Dr. Doctora Celeste Freites Gonzalez and I have been teaching since 2019 a course that is titled The Constitutional Right to Special Education, that is for law students, graduate education students, and graduate social science students that will be professionals in the special education area. And now we are working on publishing a book about the constitutional and statutory rights to special educations of students. For the first time, our book will have a profile of the public education, special education students and the characteristics that they encompass, so that further studies may provide additional information. The book also focuses on recommendations to improve education, such as the implementation of curricula that focus on children that live in poverty and that have not been provided experiences and opportunities. On December 31st, the Commission Against Poverty was established in Puerto Rico through Law 84/2021 to fight child poverty and inequality that is prejudicial to education, employment, security, and other areas. So Puerto Rico is working in quite a lot of initiatives that are important to our education.
Being a lawyer, a human rights lawyer, you have been able to use our constitutional law in Puerto Rico, federal law, to try to protect these fundamental rights of education of students. But still, you see the vulnerability of our students because of the poverty, because of the lack of infrastructure and good services. And back to the Pacific, I want to give chance to Leila to tell us about the North Mariana Islands and what initiatives are you working and support for a better education there.
Thank you, Eddie. So it's it really turns out like it was a good place for me to become the Secretary of Labor, because while I was working in the school system, I worked really hard to make sure that every student who graduates would be ready to get a job. And now working at the Department of Labor, I see how important those efforts were and how they should be made across the district. So I do a lot of advocating with our education leaders in the public school system to make those career readiness courses and activities something that is ubiquitous across the system, because no matter what, every single student needs to get a job after they graduate at some point. And not all our kids are going to go off island, and not all of our kids are going to be college or pursuing university. And so that's something that I definitely advocate for with the public school system. And as the Secretary of Labor, we really focus a lot on training and work readiness options to make sure that our people are able to find their future stability and future economic independence through getting training, especially in the trades. That is a huge area of need that I'm sure is actually across all territories and states. With so much construction and infrastructure development going on, we don't have the manpower or workforce needed to be able to complete all of those jobs. And so a lot of the efforts that my team is doing right now is trying to get those systems aligned so that we can get our people into those programs and get them into the workforce. We have a huge military buildup that's happening kind of at the same time that's happening in Guam. And so we're actually competing against each other for workforce and for people to do the work. Now, on the other side of that, I do actually have a lot of personal projects related to cultural preservation. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I make content for cultural use. I have 2 films on YouTube. If you Google Exploring Lati in the Marianas, I use these films as a way to promote our local history so that all of our people will know that there are latte stones on all of our islands, all the way up to the last one. I use these films to show people what these lands look like, because although there are no people living on the islands, they are part of our cultural awareness and identity. And if we don't see them, sometimes we forget they're there, and we don't realize how important it is to protect them. And so I make films about our islands, our culture, our land, our language, our medicinal arts, as a way to help preserve those, to preserve that knowledge and to share it with new generations, and especially our diaspora who are across the world, and maybe don't have a connection to that kind of knowledge that they do seek and do yearn for. And so I try to make that available through the films that I make. I'm hoping to make another one this year. Wish me luck. It's going to be a very big challenge, but I'm really excited to be able to continue to tell stories of our history and our culture through the films that I make.
Leila, one of the most beautiful experiences when I went to CNMI was to see your presentation of your movie on the Latte Stones in the islands of the North. It was beautiful, and it's a wonderful instrument for learning and preserving culture. So thank you so much for that work. And let's move really close by to Guam. Dr. Keisha, can you please tell us what initiatives you are working on and supporting in Guam?
Sure. So I'd like to just talk about what is going on in the community, and then here at the university, as well as personally what the kind of work that I've been engaging in. But before I go into that, I just want to acknowledge that there are many people in our community, there are organizations that are working on different things at different levels and stages of our education. And while I'm going to share a few of the things that I support or that I'm a part of, I would just like to give props to the work of the other community members and my colleagues who are also engaging in this important work for our community. So in the larger community, there are a few things going on. So curriculum, culturally sustaining and culturally relevant curriculum has always just kind of been, something of interest to me and something I've actively tried to work on since I became a teacher. And so within the community, there are multiple efforts, including efforts by a nonprofit organization called Nihi Indigenous Media, which creates Samoru or local content. They make games, game shows. They have like episodes that feature content based on our language and our culture and our values. You can find them on YouTube. And then we also have a Samoru Language Consortium, which consists of different educational institutions and local organizations who are basically, we come together to promote our language and our culture and our community. And most recently, one of the things that we did is we met with our legislative leaders, asking them for assistance in further developing and strengthening our Samoru language medium programs within our school system. The University of Guam Press is also working on publishing and rolling out by hopefully later this year, social studies textbooks for the elementary grade level, kindergarten to 5th grade, which are place-based, culturally relevant. And so basically they're working in tandem with our Department of Education to replace the current centric with these more culturally relevant. Even the pictures reflect our students. For our community, we have the Chief Hurao Academy, which is the preschool immersion program for our, and they teach our Samoru language at the preschool level, ages 3 and 4. And then connected to that, as I mentioned earlier, is the Fanedakin Sinipuk Samoru Immersion Program, which I just really want to highlight here because the Fanedakin Sinipuk program is part of our Guam Department of Education. So basically, some of our leaders and educators in the Samoru Studies and Special Projects Division in our Guam Department of Education have used public education as this tool to be able to, better incorporate our language and strengthen the kind of education that our children are receiving. And so within this program, the content that they're learning is more relevant to them. They're learning everything in our language. And this is, connected to the fact that we don't have a lot of native speakers of our language. A lot of our elders are passing on, and so we definitely don't have a lot of younger speakers. And so the goal of this program is to develop and to nurture young speakers of our language, so that our language can continue to be perpetuated and can continue to live on. And so there is hope that this program will continue to the 5th grade. And then we are also actively working on encouraging our community and our leaders to continue the program into the middle school and the high school levels. Here at the university, we received a Mellon Foundation grant last year, a $900,000 grant, which I am one of the co-principal investigators for, to basically promote language revitalization efforts in our community as well as here at the university. We also offer, as Leila was talking about earlier, we offered Zo'amti or healing classes here at the university to to teach people in our community about our traditional healing practices, as well as seafaring or navigating courses, because those courses are very integral, right, to who we are as a people. We are land people, we are ocean people. And so with these practices kind of being in a state of, I would say, dormancy, right, these are some of the efforts here at the university that we're engaging in to make sure that these practices can continue to be passed on and can continue to be practiced. One of the other exciting things that we're doing here at the university is we help in our Samoa Studies program to prepare Samoa teachers, right, for full teacher certification. And so one of the things that we've proposed and is in the process of being approved is our offering of our courses for teacher preparation in our language and grounded in our values, because in the past, they've been offered in English. So we're preparing Samoa teachers, but using the English language. And so we've kind of here at our program have proposed, and we're hopefully going to be approved to offer the courses on our side and offer them in our language, it's going to be great because we have a growing immersion program. And so it'll be great to help better prepare those teachers for the Samoa immersion classroom. Finally, just on a personal level, in terms of my scholarship, my dissertation focuses on our colonial education history and offers ideas for decolonizing and genuinely transforming our education system through working with Samoa mothers and mother figures who have direct connections to our public school system. In the classroom, as I said, I'm just on a personal note and on a smaller scale, it's just making sure that my students always see themselves in the text. So I constantly am in search of, literature and articles where our students are reflected in the content. And it has enormous impact, on them both personally. And then when I see them go on into the professional fields or into the community, right? One thing that I'm just really proud of as a teacher, even as a former creative writing teacher, is I was able to develop curriculum for the students, and which included like poems and short stories and things like that from here in our Marianas archipelago, and then also beyond in other indigenous communities. And it's just been great to see them become teachers and incorporate some of this literature. I even have students who've become published authors, poets, and it's just great to see them kind of embrace themselves, their identities, and feel empowered enough to now say, oh, I can go on and do this work, right? I can go and publish literature. So more of our people can see ourselves. And then, of course, just as a mother, as a Nana, I am the mother of a child in the pilot program or the pilot grade level for the Fanedok and Sinipuk program. So just constantly actively working to try to get our children to the next grade level and get them through and make sure that, the program continues to be maintained within our public school system.
So much wonderful work being done in the territories. And we were so excited in Right to Democracy when we heard about that grant that was received by the University of Guam. And definitely one of our main projects right now is getting philanthropy to see and visualize all these important opportunities to invest in the territories and on promoting the betterment of education, for self-determination, but also for just as pilot projects, because what happens in the territories is so dire that the solutions that are done are very creative, are very important. And as you see with every panelist, they are very varied solutions, from a legal perspective, from a curriculum perspective, from a cultural perspective, from infrastructure. So we really emphasize on the need for philanthropy to see and look at these initiatives and really invest more, because right now we are not seen by private philanthropy. So that's kind of like one of my main requests to the audience today, to get that word out. Also, we're going to go to a very quick round robin question. I want you guys to answer in 1 minute. If you had a magic wand, what would be that 1 or 2 steps or actions that your local government or federal government that you would say you have to do? So please, just really fast, Jessica, can you tell us what would you order to be done by the federal or local government?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I am going to try to be as succinct and as quick as possible. The one thing, if I had to choose among all the things that I think that we ought to truly focus all of our energies and attention on, is an appraisal of our Virgin Islands codes. And that might seem a bit counterintuitive, but currently we have a lot of bills and a lot of acts that are on record that pertain to education. But some of them are actually overlapping in terms of their objectives, or they've been sitting, or they have not been revisited. And one of the things that tends to happen with the change of administration is that folks tend to have political or historical amnesia around the types of efforts and initiatives that were once in play. And so initiatives will be proposed, they will be set in motion. And once the cycle ends for those who are in leadership, it tends to get abandoned. And I think one of the ways that we can truly help to revive and honestly transform public education here in the U.S. Virgin Islands is to, one, take a critical appraisal and inventory of all of the laws that are on the books and ensure that they're in alignment with what we're actually practicing. So if there are VI codes that provide that, for example, our VI Board of Education is meant to have our commissioner in an ex officio capacity so that they're working collaboratively, then we need to think about how can we make sure that that's in fact being enacted and enforced. And then in addition to that, there's so many brilliant and innovative strategies and initiatives that are always started. The department itself churns out all of these great ideas, such as a parent university or advocacy groups and all of these other things, or even like a literacy program, right? But when funding dries up or when administration changes, people abandon these initiatives in hopes of pursuing their own personal agendas. And I think that one of the things you could truly, really rely on to really get us to the next level in our educational journey is to think about what already exists and not like really resisting the urge to reinvent the wheel and starting things all over again. If we think collaboratively, if we think historically, if we think in a trajectory and understand that there are people who are brilliant before us and there will be people brilliant afterwards, we can all use what we have and really extract the best of what we offer in terms of solutions rather than starting all over again every single time.
Those are so exciting proposals, but it took a lot more than 1 minute. So let's try to keep it to 1 minute for the rest of the answers. But I really want to hear from everybody. If you had a magic wand, Georgina, if you had a magic wand, si pudieras hacer magia, what would you order the government to do?
I would order a change in policies in regards to education to start the education of the children from birth up to the 6 years old, because we are lacking in preschool and infant and toddlers education, and many times when they go into the educational agenda, they lack the necessary skills to be able to integrate into the educational systems. So I would use our funding and any idea that is given to improve the education in the first years of the child's life, which are the most important.
That is so interesting. Thank you so much. And Dr. Keisha, what would you order the government to do?
Okay, so for our local government, I would argue for ask for more funding towards Samoa language programming. And then I would like to also encourage our local leaders to take courses, for example, here at the University of Guam, which focus on Indigenous language, culture, and history, because how can we expect them to make these genuine transformative changes to our education when they themselves didn't take courses which may have necessarily been centered on Samoa identities and history. And for the federal government, I think more dialogue and flexibility are needed when it comes to our curricula, for example, in our public school system, and the standards and the policies that they're expected to follow. I think there needs to be more engagement rather than a top-down kind of experience, which is what we're going through right now.
That's really excellent. And Layla, what would you order? What would be those 1-2 things that you would order the government to do?
I'm definitely in line with what Guam is doing because I think that if you invest, if you value something, you have to invest in it. And putting more funding towards education, both on the local side and the federal side, is key. I think it's really important that we invest in our cultural education, our place-based education, providing our students with more access to their identity within the system that they're learning. In particular, the history of the political parts of how we became part of the American family, so that we can understand how that works with our actual government systems. And finally, I think that it's really, really important that we do invest in immersion programs. I really see the value in how Hawaii has done that, and you can see the product of their students coming out and using Western education against Western activities and colonial activities, like when they went up and were trying to protect the Mauna. And I feel like immersion was part of that foundation. And in order for our people to have that same value, I really think that immersion education is so important. And I want us to do more like what Guam is doing, being more intentional in making sure that we have the workforce for that. And also, on a bigger scale, we need to make our entire island population give access to them to trades education, because we can't rely on foreign labor. We have only oceans at our borders, and we need to be able to build a workforce within.
It is emotional, Layla, to hear you, because definitely there's so much that we have to share with each other that is so important. And so that's why these dialogues are so fruitful. And I want to go last but not least to Donna in American Samoa. Can you tell us, what would you order the government to do?
Similar to like what everyone says, of course, proper funding and how it is allocated. I think investing in teachers is a great way for proper funding. I have many friends back home who are teachers and doing amazing work in and outside of the classroom. There's little to no resource to engage and retain our Samoan students. It's not fair for our Samoan teachers to carry the weight of the education system. And we also need to invest in a college and career access initiative, especially in the professional technical area. Many of our mechanics, professional prof tech healthcare positions, and more are always folks from off island. If we had programming for these professions, we would not need to outsource our employment, providing early access for post-secondary options at an early age too as well.
Definitely a lot of great ideas that have come from just 10 minutes of talking. If we could make real each of your orders, it would result in a change in our education system that is positive. And I think that one of the most important messages that we heard today is the intersectionality of the challenges that are faced in the territories and that seep into the education system. So we have high levels of poverty, high levels of displacement, high levels of vulnerability to climate change events that affect our infrastructure, that affect the lives of our students in the public education system, and that make it harder for special education students, for younger students that come from poor, poverty-ridden families to get the skills. So when you hear these wonderful leaders from the territories telling you their ideas, it's because it comes from that intersectionality of these problems that we face as colonies of the U.S. Also, the importance of talking between each other. This is something that in Right to Democracy we definitely are priding ourselves of doing, of creating these spaces for us to exchange with other territories. What are the challenges and what are the solutions? I feel like Georgina's approach of legality, of education as a fundamental right that needs to be protected, is something that can be also emulated in the other territories. Also, this efforts, all these diverse efforts in the Pacific that you see from Guam, CNMI, American Samoa, when they realize, how do we tailor an education system that protect our culture, that will really serve to help the students understand who they are, what they are, and also venues and opportunities to get into the workforce, to get the life that they aspire to live in. And our amazing friends here in Virgin Islands doing very quality work in organizing themselves, looking within to understand and push the changes that are actually the ones that are needed, and not be dispersed all over, right? Doing different things. So those are things that are all applicable to all territories. And we are so excited to be able to have these conversations. I really hope that these conversations are the ones that it's only a beginning, and that these wonderful leaders are able to connect with each other. We can have further activities that we can support. And I want to call for the public to please stay connected with us in Right to Democracy through our media, social media, in our Instagram page, in our Facebook page. You will find us at Right to Democracy. And there you will be able to see how monthly we do these type of dialogues to open these spaces of conversation, but also our advocacy efforts and the Building a Movement report that delineates all the work that we did of engaging in the territories, the listening tour, the summit, and the coalition that has been created. This dialogue is a product of that coalition, and I'm going to let our co-host, the chair of our Committee of Education in Right to Democracy Coalition, to close the conversation today, not without first thanking our wonderful panelists for being with us. Jessica.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Adi, for moderating this much needed conversation. It was truly incredible to hear so much information from all of these territorial representatives about what the state of public education looks like in each of these places. And to be honest, it is so evident to me that there are so many overlaps in our challenges, in our shared experience, and also in some of the ways we're imagining and considering solutions to some of these persistent problems. Thank you so much to our panelists representing each of the islands, the territories, the archipelagos. We appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge, expertise, and all of the information, wisdom that you have about education generally, but specifically within your context. I'd like to also thank our listening audience. Thank you all so much for tuning in and for participating in this conversation and your viewership. If you are interested in the work that we are doing here at Right to Democracy and REAL, please stay connected with us. We are on mission to upend colonialism in the territories and to also decolonize education very boldly and very plainly. And so you can follow the Radical Education and Advocacy League through our various social media handles. Specifically, we are at www.theradicalleague.com. And you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Radical League. And we are also available on Instagram at The Radical League. If you are interested in being in touch, in collaborating, if you need assistance in advocacy work, or anything pertaining to equipping students and those who serve them. That means educators, parents, anyone who's in the business of education and in making sure that it is quality. We are here to help and assist, and we love to be in touch.
In this wonderful conversation. And I hope this is the start of many other dialogues and actions together. Please remember to follow us, Right to Democracy. Thank you so much.